one that's more of a rock-oriented sound, and the one that you have some singles out for now is more of a like a blues-oriented sound. And I love the sound of the singles so far. So I was kind of curious to know about your influences a little bit. The blues has kind of crept its way into so many styles and people's sounds. Do you have a particular favorite like treatment of the blues and its history? Like, for me, like I'm a big fan of Johnny Guitar Watson, the influence he's had on Frank Zappa, the blues sound in Charles Mingus's compositions. I mean, is there a particular artist for you that has molded that into something bigger that really has affected what you like to hear?
It was so pervasive in the music I grew up listening to. I didn't get the artists that made blues records like Muddy Waters and Howlin' Wolf and T-Bone Walker and all that sort of stuff weren't on my radar as a kid. Hendrix and Clapton were on my radar. Yeah. But those guys would talk about what they listened to, Robert Johnson and stuff like that. And so I kind of came late to the party compared to some of my friends who were just absolute blues fans and grew up listening to all the different Kings and Freddie and BB and Albert and Muddy Waters and Howlin' Wolf and going back to Robert Johnson and even more older primitive stuff, which was available on records. It wasn't my thing. When I met Warren back in 92, 93, I had confessed to him that I didn't really know a lot about blues piano at all. And there were some icons from that, Otis Spann, Pinetop Perkins, in rock and roll, Johnny Johnson and people like that. And I didn't know anything about them, and I told Warren, and he made me a cassette. It was like a 90-minute cassette full of what he thought were really cool examples of blues piano playing. And so I was pretty late to the party when it came to that. And we were laughing about that the other day, actually. I said, remember when you gave me that cassette? And he goes, yeah, I remember that. I said, I didn't have a clue. And he said, very sweetly, my, how times have changed.
Yeah.
So, it's never too late to learn stuff.
Mm-hmm.
But if you listened to jazz, which I did, and some of the songs were what they would call a straight blues form, the Sidewinder, all these classic, a lot of Horace Silver, Blakey, they were all fancy blues heads,
yeah,
for the most part.
When you were also coming out of Ray Charles, right?
Yeah, not so much as a kid, but I was more into, the Doors and Santana and Hendrix and the Eagles and the Beatles and the Hall of Fame rock, Joplin and that sort of stuff. And then on the other, that was my rock and roll side. And then on my jazz side, I was into trumpet players like Lee Morgan and Clifford Brown and Miles Davis.
Yeah.
And from the standpoint of classical music, it was more about the composers, and I loved the newer modern I guess you call it neoclassical, everything from late romantic like Ravel and Debussy, and going into Stockhausen and Stravinsky and forward.
So when you're talking neoclassical, you're not talking Yngwie Malmsteen.
No, that's neoclassic rock, which would be a whole other story. But I loved lots of different kinds of music for lots of different reasons, but the blues itself wasn't something that I would like gravitate to. It's funny. But then, listen to Hendrix.
Yeah.
And listen to what Hendrix talked about in interviews.
Mm-hmm.
So it was easy as a 10, 11, 12-year-old kid to know how important that music was. But